anything. Good evening. This is the portion of the meeting before the general meeting where we're actually performing interviews for boards and commissions. And our first person, our only person, is Ms. Dakota DiMatteo. Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
And you're an applicant for the Citizens Traffic Commission. And thank you so much for applying and volunteering in the community. These are relatively straightforward. We'll ask you just a couple questions, and then later there'll be a vote on that. I'll ask one question. What motivated you to apply to be a member of the Citizens Traffic Commission?
Yeah, so I am very passionate about pedestrian safety,
Mhm.
specifically walkers and bikers. So I moved here from Philadelphia. I currently live on Black Rock Road.
Mm.
So that's kind of what got me into the Traffic Commission, just to ask some questions. They mentioned there was an open spot. So it also seemed like they were kind of struggling with some like data analysis potentially. I have a background in data analysis. I thought it could help out. So that's kind of what brought me here today.
Awesome. Supervisor McCartney hasn't joined us. I apologize. I didn't realize he was here. Yeah, Supervisor Garnier?
Sure. Thank you for applying and coming before us. In terms of, it sounds like you've been to some CTC meetings?
Yeah.
All right, that's good. I'm wondering if obviously, I'm assuming it's something on Black Rock Road that got you interested. If you could speak about that a little bit in your experience with the CTC, and then how you would use your background in data analysis and other things to work with the team to
Sure.
do some work.
So kind of, I guess, there's probably another follow-up to the Black Rock Road, but the initial kind of thing raised was there was like a Facebook post about the canal path. So there were just concerning things in the comment section, but someone had posted, how to make a complaint of sorts to the Traffic Commission. So I'm a fan of, if you complain about something, you should, get your hands dirty and do it. So I honestly think that the speed limit might need to be brought down, because I found out there's a 10-mile-an-hour grace period for people driving, which like 45 miles an hour between a canal path and like a state mandated bike road, I think is pretty high when you have people walking, you have bike riders, and it's not a state road, so it's something the township could do something about, I think. So kind of that's how I would like to get more involved with it. I'm not sure their scope of abilities right now. I know a lot of it's through local jurisdiction. So in terms of data analysis in the meeting, they were bringing up like deer strikes that they're pulling from police traffic data. They just seem to be struggling with it a little, and it's something I know how to do very quickly.
Thank you.
Supervisor Blendy?
Yeah, I knew you had been at meetings, especially, thank you for knowing what's a state road and what's a township road and how we have less control over some of them than the others. You've hit 4 key points that took me months to figure out on citizens traffic, so thank you. Thank you so much for raising your hand.
Supervisor Ross?
I don't have any questions, but thank you very much for applying.
Thanks so much. We'll be in touch with you shortly. At this time, I'm going to call the formal public meeting to order. What? Huh? Oh. I didn't, but yes. Well, just for the record, Dakota, before I call to order, Supervisor Grenier mentioned that you went to the #1 university in the world for your master's. So, yeah. So that certainly puts you in good stead. Yeah. And your undergrad was awesome, too. So those are all fine universities. With that, I will call the meeting to order. And we're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Supervisor McCartney.
Here. Oh,
Sorry. Present. Supervisor Grenier.
Here.
Supervisor Ross.
Here.
And Supervisor Blundy.
I'm here.
Okay, with that, we've completed the roll call. Now on to community announcements. A reminder, this portion of the agenda, residents, youth organizations may call in to make a special announcement or contact the township at lmt.org to request a special announcement to be added to the agenda. The Yardley Farmers Market will be at the Community Center at 1550 Oxford Valley Road from 10 a.m. to 12 on Saturday. That's this Saturday, December 21st. Last chance for those food gifts that you might be thinking of. There's other stuff at the farmer's market, but it's here at the community center. You don't want to miss it. Now, on Friday, Lower Makefield Township is going to be hosting another blood drive for the Red Cross right here from 12 to 5 p.m. in the meeting room right here again. And I'm going to tell you right now, I donated the last time I'm here. The cookies were solid. The music was rocking. It was a 70s mix that I found very good. So if you haven't planned to donate blood, you're going to want to definitely do that.
John, can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
Thanks. So we were asked to schedule, we have had 4 blood drives ready this year. This is something we've been doing regularly since after the pandemic. The Red Cross asked us if we could put on another day, this day, because there's such a shortage. And unlike most of our other blood drives, we have plenty of openings still. And I know it's the holiday season, it's hard for people to make this kind of commitment right now, but if there's anything that, anyone who has time, I can tell you there's plenty of spots, 12 to 5. Please consider making an appointment. We usually sell out. This time we're not even close.
And along those lines, I would be one of the folks, but I donated our last drive, and so I'm like 5 days short or 7 days short of the cycle. We're entering the holiday season. I believe this year Hanukkah and Christmas synced up, so that's solid. Everybody's got that same day there. But what folks should be thinking about is, hey, is there something I could be doing to help others that is of almost no cost to me, and I get free cookies and rockin' tunes? So again, make that pitch. To sign up for more information, go to redcrossblood.org, enter sponsor code Lower Makefield. And if for some reason that date doesn't work for you, you can find other locations, but we'd love to have you here. The Environmental Advisory Council is hosting their first Styrofoam Collection event for 2025 on Saturday, January 11th from 10 a.m. to noon at the Township Building. That's right here, 1100 Edgewood Road. Along with your clean white Styrofoam, you can bring natural corks, cleaned pill bottles with tops, and batteries. If you have any questions, you can check out the calendar at our website at lmt.org. And remember, it's Christmas season or holiday season. You're going to have a lot of white Styrofoam from all those packing things, but no packing peanuts. I've been told that we can't recycle those for some reason. And that completes our community announcements. At this time, we're going to invite public comment on non-agenda items. So if there's an issue you're concerned about that's not on the agenda and you would like to address the board and the public, you're welcome to come up to the dais. Just give us your name and whether you're a Lower Makefield resident or not. And I'm not seeing anybody rushing the dais, so while that's not happening, I'm going to ask, do we have any callers on the line?
No callers.
No callers. All right. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 6. This is the consent agenda items, and these are non-controversial items that we'll put together. If there's any member of the board that would like to remove one of the items from the consent agenda and have that dealt with specifically, now is the time to ask for that. If there's any concern to the public with any of the consent agenda items, you're also welcome as well. As I look around, is there any?
Just a quick question, where's the budget, the approval for the buddet? Would that?
That's under
manager's report?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's under.
Yep.
Thanks.
I wouldn't put that in the consent.
I didn't know. I see it.
I'm not seeing any desire to remove any items from the consent agenda. With that, I'll entertain a motion if there's one.
So moved.
Second?
All right, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the consent agenda items signify by saying aye. Aye. Go ahead.
Those opposed? Opposed.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Let the record reflect that the motion passed 4-1. We'll move on to agenda item 7, engineers report, general project updates. Melanie?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and fellow board members. Our only update is that the 2024 road program is being closed out. Everything else was outlined in our engineer's report, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board has.
Excellent. Are there any questions?
I don't know if this is a question for you or a question, Derek, but I know there was a question about over on Quarry, like at a road that was done as part of last year, seems to be buckling a little bit, and wondering if we have any update on whether or not we can fix that.
Thanks.
Good evening, Supervisors. Yes, we did try to see if PICO, with their gas work that they're doing on Lindenhurst, to see if they would take some responsibility of that. Of course, they didn't, and I can't really argue with that. I don't think it's being caused by that. Any remediation work would be done solely by the township on the township's dime at this point. It was probably an incorrect asphalt. We need a stronger asphalt mix in that intersection, is what the engineers are telling us. So we would have to replace it on our dime when that time comes.
Okay, not an answer I love, but thank you for the answer.
Yeah, no worries.
Yep.
With that, we'll move on to agenda item 8, manager's report.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The first item on my section of the agenda is consideration of Resolution 24-31, fixing tax rates and special levies and adopting the 2025 budget. I don't know if you want to make a motion on that, or I do have some commentary on the item. So, Mr. Chair, I don't know how you want me to.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion. So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay.
Okay. So, as the board is aware, the budget has been available for public inspection. It's been available since your adoption that occurred in November, and has been available again for inspection throughout. Sorry, I was looking for something. So it was made available on 11/27/2024, again through today. No comments were received from the general public. As the board is aware, we did receive a request from the Environmental Advisory Council to restore their proposed 2025 funding to match their 2024 funding. That was a difference of about $1,500. In addition to that, this is there were a series of changes that minor changes that have been made by staff during the course of the past month. One had to do with the contracted services line item in the 400 section of the budget. That expense was reduced by $7,170. To reflect the cost of the recommended proposal for PADCD Strategic Management Planning Program consulting fees, which is an agenda item after this item. Again, the preliminary budget reflected the higher cost of the two finalists for that service, but we did our recommendation is the lower of the two cost proposals. There were slight reductions in both engineering and legal fees for 2025, again, reducing each of those line items by $5,000. Both of those items now are generally consistent with the 2024 budget. So there was some savings that could be captured there. Again, as I mentioned, we did increase the Environmental Advisory Council's budget back to the $4,000, which again is consistent with the 2024 budget for the EAC. And then we were able to make a reduction also in the minor equipment line item for IT equipment. We reduced that line item by $10,000. Again, that's generally an allowance line item. There's no specific purchases that are contemplated, but we reduced that down. Part of this exercise, just for background, was done because of the conversation that we had previously about the opportunity with Civic Plus, which again is another agenda item moving down my section of the agenda. So we did revise the budget to include cost for the Civic Plus, which is the website portion, initial term costs.
But again, the net change in the general fund was actually a reduction of slightly less than $1,000. So very minor sort of change in terms of overall budget, actually a slight reduction. The only other changes that were made had to do with Park and Rec Fund. Line item 451-247, which is a special events line item for the Park and Rec Fund. We reduced that by $16,000. As I noted in an email to you, there was money that was set aside to do sort of a community events such as the Community Pride Day that you've done in the past. Even with that reduction, there is still an additional $20,000 in that line item for purposes of doing some sort of community event, if that's the decision of the township and the Board of Supervisors. And then the contracted services line item, 451-300, was increased by the cost associated with the transition to Civic Rec for recreation management software. So again, a net reduction of $330. So just some slight tweaks that have occurred over the course of the past month, consistent with sort of the charge or direction that we got from the Board of Supervisors to see if we could accommodate the opportunity through Civic Rec within the confines of the preliminary budget, and we were able to do that through these adjustments. So happy to answer any questions that anyone may have. I apologize for the detail in going through this. I just wanted to make a note of that.
Any members have any questions?
Yeah, I have some questions. I hit the button first, Dan. I beat you. I don't know that I'm startled. I don't know that I'm that excited, but I didn't realize that there was strong direction from the board on Civic Plus/Civic Rec. What I do remember is some conversation that they were interested in coming here, so their original quote was lessened so that it came in under the vendor we were going with. Mm-hmm. But we had some questions about, well, what about the year after, and what does it actually look like? So could you provide some details on that, please?
Sure, happy to. So again, both quotes were in your packet. So there's two solutions. The first quote, again, had to do with website. The initial term cost with the implementation was $24,711.50, and then the annual recurring service charges after that, after the initial 12-month period, or $7,412 annually. So those are the ongoing sort of expenses beyond implementation on the website side. And then on the recreation management side, the initial term cost was $15,669.37, with an annual reoccurring service charge of $32,137.50 moving forward. There is language in the proposal that talks about sort of an annual increase or uplift after the as sort of the relationship progresses. But that's what we know at this point.
So, and that's, I guess the thinking is, so $15,669.37 to $32,000 next year, and then, as you said, upward from there. And the thinking is kind of to roll it out from Park and Rec to other departments, so in theory, additional costs associated with this moving forward?
So the Park and Rec is a specific the recreation management is a specific module that they have. Again, they have other solutions. There's no requirement to pursue those other solutions, but there would be an opportunity if the township chose to do so moving forward.
But that's the whole reason, right? That
I mean,
was
in
the
part, it was
impetus.
some of the direction was we have these disparate systems to try to create unification of those systems, create single sign-ons from a user perspective. Civic Plus, with their suite of solutions, does present that. They are the leader in doing governmental websites throughout the country. Bucks County's website is currently through Civic Plus. So that was really what was, I think, some of the discussion that occurred at the Board of Supervisors meeting, and then there was some direction that was provided to EMAC to look at that as sort of an objective as well. They went through, they did a review, they spoke with Civic Plus. They're recommending moving in this direction. Again, Monica, I don't know if you want to talk specifically. I mean, the recreation management piece is probably the most impactful in terms of the efficiency of the work that your staff is doing. I don't know if you want to comment on that again. But.
Dave, while she's walking up here, we talked about the time frame for implementation wouldn't be right away, so there's that issue. And then if we can also, and I think this applies to Park and Rec too, but look at, if we're picking up these programs, then some others that should be replaced, I would think, so some of the other spends that we have might go away. So
Yeah,
it's
there's
not
things
just
yeah, correct. So when
so
we're
we
talking
make sure
about
that's
subsequent
covered.
year spends, I mean, that's not the net cost to the township because there's existing costs that's being incurred in those areas. But I don't know if you want to talk about just workflow and the efficiencies associated with the
We
recreation.
do have a separate agenda item specifically for Civic
Oh.
Plus.
Do you want me to wait for that one?
Sorry.
I mean,
That's fine.
yeah.
I can wait.
Well, you're welcome to stay there.
So again, I mean, I guess to Supervisor Blundy's point,
Yeah, it
the
would be
budget
good to have
document has
this
been
budget.
adjusted
Yeah.
to sort of reflect the ability to do that.
Yeah.
Again, while there's, the budget document is a planning document, it doesn't necessarily obligate you to do things. Now, I do realize that there's subsequent actions on the agenda that are making commitments to do certain things. But the thinking was to modify the budget to accommodate it, again, if the desire is not to proceed on that agenda item, then again, there's no harm, no foul in terms of the modifications that were made.
Ask a couple other questions, another.
Sure.
Dave, on some of the other items you outlined as changes since the last budget, it looks like there's been a reduction in 400.312 and 400.314. Those are fees for engineering and legal fees.
Yeah.
Professional services, essentially, each at $5,000 to reflect 2024 projected.
Yeah, so the engineering was reduced down to be consistent with the 2024 budget, and then the legal was reduced to be generally consistent with the projected spend in 2024.
Okay. In terms of projects that we have going on or other items we have that may require those, I know in speaking with some staff about some projects, they look like they may be at or close to going above budget that'll go into next year, et cetera. I'm thinking more on the engineering side, not legal fees. I think you've been okay, just saying. So I want to make sure that we address that accordingly. And it's,
so this 400, there's multiple engineering line items in your budget. Some are more project-based engineering. This is just general engineering, so that was reduced.
That's going to be a little bit on you to manage to that number, right?
Sure.
Okay. And then $10,000 reduction in minor equipment on the IT side, is that related to some of the IT services that we'll be talking about later tonight, I think? Or is that
That's
something
not,
else?
this was sort of an allowance, a general allowance that we put in for just sort of incremental upgrades to equipment, really. And so some of this was a guess, if you will, for just to, again, have some allowance in the event that things materialize or there's needs that occur over the course of the year.
And you're comfortable with that reduction?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're fine. And again, if something significant was to materialize, then we would obviously come back and have a conversation on that.
And I think maybe, I don't know if it's the biggest number one, but the one that I maybe didn't notice the first time around was a significant amount of money for some type of event akin to maybe a smaller version of Community Pride Day, that we had previously put on pause as we get things squared away. I don't know that we had any discussion as a board as to whether or not we wanted to reinstate that.
Yeah, correct.
And what we would do there. So I don't know if the board, I haven't given it a ton of thought, so I'm curious about what the board thinks about if we just remove that entirely this year, or if we have thoughts on what we'd actually want to do this year, given where we're at. I'm just thinking about it out loud. I don't know. I think this year, given everything we'll be looking at, I'd probably be okay removing it from the budget. And then
Do you know the number? Because I
it's-
wasn't aware
there's-
either.
The budget was reduced by 16,000, but it still includes $20,000. So I think originally it was 36. And Dave can correct me if I
That's all
misread.
special events, so that includes Veterans Day and everything else. So we wouldn't, it just depends on how many of the events.
Right,
Oh,
I think
okay.
with
I read
with
it
the
like
reduction, just based on the information that you conveyed, the 2024 projected spend was somewhere around, I'm going to round down, but it was around $15,000 for all events. There's still,
I don't have it in front of me.
what's that?
I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
So this year, Veterans Day was just about break even. That's because we didn't have Community Day, so the people who usually support Community Day supported Veterans Day. So
Yeah.
if we bring back Community Day, we'd have to really reach out for more sponsors. We could look at changing the economics of Community Day and offering it completely differently. So, of course, it's completely up to the board, but
Do we pay any participants for the parade at Veterans Day?
Yeah, a few. Mhm.
Okay, we should take a look at. who
Yes,
we're
I have
paying.
an after-action report I can share with the board.
I found out, I mean, it kind of makes sense, but we pay the high school, right? Because they have to mobilize and get their uniforms clean and stuff, and
Yeah.
they're a key part of the parade. But I didn't realize all the logistics that go into putting on a parade.
It just, sometimes in parades that are focused on a specific event, sometimes there's participants where you're like, does that make sense? Yeah, that's all. I thought there might have been a few at the Veterans Day Parade that didn't make a lot of sense to me. I wasn't sure if we paid them or not.
And the flyover was free.
The flyover was free.
Flyover is cool.
The flyover rocked. All right. Other questions about Resolution 24-31?
So Monica, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. So initially, there was $50,000 that was in that line item in the preliminary budget. The projected spend is $14,000 in 2024. So we
So it sounds like
reduced
yeah.
the line item by 16, and then there's still $34,000 of resource in that line item.
So probably another 15,000. If we reduce Community Day, another 15,000 would need to be taken out, or could potentially.
Right, so again, I don't know that there was any, sort of, we're not asking necessarily for a commitment for Community Pride Day today, but there is resource there in the event you want to do a community event. Again, the budget is a planning document, not necessarily a...
Just one more?
Supervisor Belendy?
Thank you. And can you just remind me what money is still earmarked for Patterson Farm next year's budget?
Sure.
Thank you.
I think so. Yeah.
So in the Fund 17, which is the 2016 bond proceeds fund, there's $700,000 that's been rolled into 2025 for Patterson Farm.
And that anticipates the work that, we had talked about last year, but nothing additional at this point, in part because that work didn't get to happen?
Correct. That is correct. It's essentially rolling that work forward to 2025. That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
We have a motion on the floor and second. Is there any public comment on Resolution 24-31? Is there a caller on the line?
No cause.
With no callers and no questions,
I wasn't sure, does the board have an interest in reducing, related to the Community Pride Day allotment that's still there? Was it 16 or 14?
So there was $14,000 of spend. There's still, so it was the original line item was $50,000 in
Right.
the preliminary budget. we took $16,000 out to offset some of the costs associated with the Park and Rec management software that we're potentially talking about in a subsequent agenda item. And then there's still on top, so 50 minus 16 is 34.
Right.
So there's still a $20,000 delta between 2024 spend and what's in that line item.
And the 2024 number could still cover everything but Community Pride Day for 2025 that we normally do, from a special events perspective?
If we had 15,000 remaining in community, in special events, we'd be able to cover all the other events. And to be honest, if we get enough sponsorship, we might not even use all of that money.
Yeah, we should try and get all sponsorship, in my opinion, but.
It's always a goal.
Yeah.
Yeah, so again, you could do that. Again, it's not impact, there's no proposed millage rate change or anything on the special purpose park and rec tax. You could remove it if you feel inclined to do that, or you could leave it for the potential of planning some sort of event in 2025 akin to the Community Pride Day or something of that nature. Again, irrespective of all of that, I think Monica can speak for herself and her staff. They always attempt to try to have those events offset by contributions. So whatever the board's preference is, that's fine.
Any last questions before we call the question? I'm not hearing any. I'll call the question. All those in favor of Resolution 24-31, fixing tax rates and special levies and adopting the 2025 budget, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Abstain? Let the record reflect that the budget passed 4-1.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The next item is consider authorizing township manager to engage a consultant to perform services under Pennsylvania Department of Community Economic Development Strategic Management Planning Program. Again, this has been a topic of conversation at prior meetings. We did receive funding from the Commonwealth to offset the cost of this effort. This has been the effort that we've been talking about in terms of developing a multi-year financial and operational plan. You had authorized the release of a request for proposals back in December of last year. They were due in January of this year. Again, the reason for the delay in undertaking this work is we were waiting for funding from the Commonwealth to offset, or at least partially offset, the cost associated with the work. There were 5 respondents to the RFP. We went through a process in which we narrowed that down to 2. When we submitted the grant application, it was based on the higher of the 2 proposals. Tonight, we're prepared to recommend the lower of the 2 cost proposals and to award, we're recommending the award of this work to Strategic Solutions, which is a Pittsburgh-based firm that has done this work throughout areas of the Commonwealth. The total cost of the proposal is $64,730. Our net cost, again, because 50% of that cost will be covered by the Commonwealth, is $32,365, and that amount has been incorporated into the budget that you just adopted. So I'm happy to answer any questions they may have. But again, the staff's recommendation is to engage Strategic Solutions.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions? Any public comment? And anyone on the phone?
No cause.
With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstain? Let the record reflect that the motion passed 5-0.
Thank you very much. The next item is consider authorizing the township manager to engage an IT managed services provider. Again, this was a service that the Township Board of Supervisors had previously authorized the release of a request for proposals. We received 8 responses to our request for proposal. Staff is recommending the engagement of ASK Technologies out of the Ballot-Kinwood area to, again, provide IT managed services for the township and its IT infrastructure. The cost in the proposal, the total cost, monthly cost is $11,785. Our current monthly cost is $22,089.62. So the effort did result in an annualized savings of a little bit shy of $124,000, or a 47% reduction in spend. There are some uncertainties associated with this transition, so there may be some additional transitions costs. But again, we feel comfortable that those costs are not going to be material, and again, you would generate annual savings moving forward by virtue of the transition. They are, again, based in Ballard-Kinwood, serving municipalities in the suburban Philadelphia area, including, I guess their most local client would be Bristol Township.
So moved.
Second?
Are there any questions from board members? Any questions from the public comment? Anyone on the line?
No one online.
Okay, with that, call the question. All those in favor of authorizing the township manager to engage in an IT managed service provider, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstain? Let the record reflect that it passed 5-0. Moving on to agenda item 8D.
So 8D is consider resolution 24-32, adopting a revised Lower Makefield Township Employee Handbook. Again, this is an item that the township has been working on for some time, that is being brought to finality. The township solicitor has reviewed the document, and it is before you for your potential action. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have.
So moved.
Second.
Any board member questions?
Just finally, happy we finally got here.
Any public comment? Anyone on the phone?
No one on the phone.
Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of resolution 24-32 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And let the record, any opposed, abstain? Sure, okay. Let the record reflect that that motion passed 5-0. And moving on to agenda item 8E, consider proposal from Civic Plus. I know we've talked at length about this, but Dave, did you want to cover anything additional?
I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have, but beyond what was already said, I don't have anything else.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, for purposes of discussion, I will second. Is there, I know we didn't talk about the time savings in terms of processing that we talked about at the last meeting. We
Right.
really never valued that at all in terms of its,
Again, it's predominantly impacting you, so. Yes. It's not in. I'm not sure. Okay. It is in the OneDrive. I don't.
It's on the SharePoint, yeah.
Monica, I know last time you talked a little bit about the value in terms of the software and saving us some manual effort in terms of processing pool passes and other stuff. Have you guys had a chance to value how much the savings would be, or just in terms of hours or time?
So if we were to convert 50% of our communication over to online interactions through the new software, we would have a cost savings estimated around $74,000 for the year,
Okay,
if that's 50% in the first year,
okay. And that would be more than the cost of the software, wouldn't it?
by far.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Are there any other board comments? Any public comment? Anyone on the line?
No one online.
Okay. With that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of the proposal for Civic Plus signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Opposed? Okay, let the record reflect that the motion failed with a vote of 2 to 3.
Thank you very much.
But, so that mean, so now it was approved in the budget, right? But it was not approved to execute?
Correct.
It was earmarked in the budget, but not executed. So we could just, okay.
Again, we just won't spend the money.
I just want to make sure I understood
Yep.
Yeah.
the process.
Okay. Moving on to agenda item 9A, Public Works.
I'm back. All right. Before the board this evening, we have the consider acceptance of the bid in the amount of $307,263.25 to T. Schieffer Contractors, Inc. for the traffic signal and ADA improvements at the intersection of Pine Grove and Big Oak Roads. Just a reminder that this project is partially funded with a PennDOT Green Light Go program grant in the amount of $305,320.
So moved.
Second?
So just to clarify, that's a net cost to the township of about $2,000-ish?
If the
That
board remembers, we purchased this equipment already.
Okay.
This equipment was purchased for $126,904.80.
Okay.
So as of right now, just construction cost, it is a cost of about $53,000 for construction and equipment over grant
Okay.
amount.
Just want to make sure we understand
Yep.
the net.
Because the grant, they'd have a 20% match, so, with our match, we're still over about $53,000.
Gotcha.
Any other board questions? Hearing none. Any public comment? Any callers?
No one online.
Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the bid in the amount of $307,263.25 from T. Schieffer Contractors for traffic signal and ADA improvements at the intersection of Pine Grove Road and Big Oak Road, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? Let the record reflect that the motion passed 5-0.
Thank you, Supervisors.
Moving on to the solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The minutes should reflect that the supervisors present this evening met in executive session immediately prior to this Board of Supervisors meeting to discuss litigation and employment matters. Maybe into item 10A in your package should be the ordinance prepared for, with respect to the responsible contractors ordinance. Happy to answer any questions you may have. If it is accepted, we would prepare this in resolution form, ordinance form, and prepare for advertisement.
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
Questions?
Sure.
General, I think, I like the ordinance. I had a couple questions on it. In terms of looking at the numbers and types of projects and that we may have that would fall under the ordinance, have we done any evaluation in terms of how many one, I want to make sure that that there are contractors that meet all of the requirements because they are extensive. So I just want to make sure that there's a pool of contractors generally. So we want to make sure that's there. And then when we look at what we have coming up, generally speaking, if we know that we'll get more than a single bidder, let's say, on multiple projects, given what the thresholds and what the requirements are. Have we done any analysis like that?
We have not. Again, just for benefit of the conversation, and the township has an existing RCO ordinance, which has a monetary threshold less than what is in the proposed ordinance. That being said, there are some changes in terms of some of the requirements that are being placed on contractors, particularly as it relates to apprenticeship programs. Derek, I don't know if you, again, I hate to pull you up here, but so I don't know if you can provide any sort of context on any of that from a contractor perspective, again, just based on your experience.
Yeah, obviously, the township does utilize a differing number of contractors, whether they be union, non-union, apprentice, there are non-union contractors that have apprenticeship programs, part of the ABC. I was trying to figure out real fast if T. Schieffer's is union or not. I think they're a member of ABC, so they would kind of fall into it. A lot of the road program, last year's contractor was out of Jersey, so they actually wouldn't comply with the RCO if it was adopted, so it would, it depends. There are skills and...
Did we get respondents to the road program last year that would comply?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, General Asphalt does. Morrissey would comply. I think Earl does not. They're a non-union,
Okay.
non-apprentice driven.
But these are known contractors that we have a history with that we can rely on. Okay. And then relative to, like, we're not the only township that has one of these ordinances. Are we any different? Are there anything unique about what we're looking at versus any other townships that may have, if we used anything as a go-by or anything like that?
Yeah, so there was, sort of within the space, there was a model that was used. It was a model from Westchester Borough, so a Chester County borough. That was in part sort of the basis for some of the work that was done on what's proposed. I will note that in that model, there was, because there's an applicability threshold in terms of dollar amount that's currently in the draft. The current draft is reflecting $150,000, so any contract that would be above at or above $150,000 would be subject to the requirements of the ordinance. The model did have that number established at $250,000, but that, again, is at the discretion of the Board of Supervisors.
Is there I have no insight into, is there any reason for the difference in numbers? When we look at our projects, do we have a significant difference?
You have some towns in the county that are at 10,000, some are at 750,000.
Okay.
It's just,
I just want to understand what the range.
It really runs a gambit.
Okay.
That is correct. Derek is correct. It runs from 10,000 to 250 plus.
Okay.
So, again, I think there's some discretion on your part. I don't know that a 150 to 250 in terms of impact is going to have a tremendous impact. That's sort of tough, I guess, to quantify. I think we do, I don't want to say concerned, but we do obviously want to make sure that we have competition in our bidding process, and so that's really our main sort of concern, if you will.
I think, and I don't know that there's a huge difference between 150 and 250 when it comes to executing projects and who would bid on what. The one item that was maybe I read too much into or had too many concerns about was there's a minimum number of years of doing a specific type of work in there.
I think it's 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, in one it was 5. I think another might have been 3 for some reason. But yes, I remember 5. I'm curious, and I can't think of an example, but there's always something new. If there's a type of work that just is new,
right, yeah.
and nobody has 5 years of experience, or just for some reason we're dealing with a lot of contractors that just don't have that years of experience that come back but meet all the other requirements. Do we have a method or a way to deal with that?
You've waived. You have the discretion to waive.
So the
certain
board would
provisions.
have to vote to waive
Correct.
like we've done
Yep.
on others,
Yep.
and we have that ability. Okay.
And again, if it's a type of work that no one really has any experience in, then you don't get any bidders.
Well, unless it's a new type of work in the, newly established companies that just don't meet the 5 years.
Sure.
But the
Waive.
waiver is correct. You can
Okay.
waive.
I just want to make sure we have a way to address
The
that.
one item that Derek sort of raised or just posed a question on earlier that I don't know that we had a conversation about was contracts that are obtained through cooperative sort of purchasing arrangements, and whether there should be some exception to, for example, contractors that may be working through like the Keystone Purchasing Network, which the township has used in the past, or co-stars or other things like that. I don't know that there's any language in there that accepts those,
Or excludes them.
excludes them from applicability.
There really is not.
So again, maybe something that you want to.
Just for, the courts, for example, are a specialty.
Yeah.
So if we have that in there, for example, the contractor that the township has been successfully using may not comply with that RCO no longer. So we would have to go to market, and you may get contractors that claim to have the 5 years and may have it on the books, but they're not a specialty contractor in terms of, basketball courts, for example. So that was something we were thinking of.
So that just came up when you were asking the question about its impact to our current
Yeah, yeah.
contracts. That was an example, and that was sort of the context in which that came up. Just
So
to-
is, going back to the waiver, when it comes to a specialty contractor, do we have the ability to issue a waiver relative to, is that our approach?
Yes.
Yeah, you want-
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
Can I ask, because something you just said, I'm not sure if I
Yeah.
understood the response. So we do use co-stars and things like co-stars frequently. Would we be prohibited, or would we have to say, we're bidding it and we're going to waive it if we go through co-stars and we get someone who doesn't comply?
Yeah, I mean, generally, you're not going, I think at that point, we would bring it back to you. Again, you're not necessarily going through a public bid process. I don't know if that's limited to when there's a public bid. I don't know if that's an exception that's not stated, but that's
It's probably implied, yes.
implied,
Because-
you
yeah,
know what I mean?
because-
Well, the reason I'm asking is, in the times, I think it's twice, I only remember 2 times that we've had to waive the responsible contractor ordinance. It was a timing issue. And I bring that up because sometimes going to co-stars is a timing issue and also cost savings. So I would hate for us to lose that flexibility. I'm wondering if an extra sentence in there cures that, or?
Let me revisit that, and I'll advise you on that, but it very well may. I believe that if it's exigent circumstances, emergencies, et cetera, things that have to be done in a timely manner, then it would be a waiver situation.
I don't want to make it sound like a bridge was falling or something.
No,
It was
I
more
understand.
like seasonal timing and
Yeah,
stuff.
we had to get
Yeah, I mean, I
something
think
done in
generally you've done
20
it,
days
you've
instead
done it
of
with
30.
road program-related
still timing,
stuff, yes.
a timing
yeah,
issue.
where there's, you've done those kinds of things.
Is that something that we would potentially have to write into the ordinance if that's something the board wanted to, or is that something we could just address on a case-by-case basis with motions? And
I guess my preference always would be to put it in.
so,
Put-
yeah, from a process perspective, I don't want to gum up the works here. If that's the case, tonight is to advertise, and then we wanted to add a line or two related to that, to co-stars related stuff, would we have to re-advertise for something
Well,
like
it
that?
hasn't been advertised yet, so
No,
we're
if
fine.
that, meaning if we voted to advertise tonight, because that's what the motion is right now, right? If we move forward with that, so we could get it out there, and then we may, if we decided to make an edit similar to what we're just talking about, would we have to re-advertise?
Yes.
I think, though, if you said, hey, I want to make this type of edit and then advertise.
That's what I was going to suggest, that you
Would be
can make a
fine.
motion to advertise with this particular edit.
You want to take a crack at the language?
But I-
Madam Attorney?
Well,
Or if the
I think
board wants
The
to.
policy question is, contracts that are sourced through CoStars or Keystone, what's that called?
Yeah, cooperative purchasing,
Right.
organizations, KPN, Keystone Purchasing Network,
Yeah.
co-stars.
If that's if the township decides to go that as the preferred contracting method, then those contracts will be subject to the rules of CoStars and the Keystone Purchasing and not necessarily the responsible contractor ordinance. Most times when we go to CoStars, it's for trucks and stuff.
Yeah, it's not for,
So it's not
for
really
services, it's for
services.
stuff.
For
Yeah.
items.
Yeah, so.
Tangibles.
That's why I'm like, okay, I
Yeah,
don't think
no,
it's that frequent,
yeah,
so.
I hear you.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
what
I
I'm
mean, I think
thinking,
you
too.
used KPN for.
KPN did the police renovations. We were looking at KPN for golf course work. Co-stars did a lot of the courts. Skylar, they did the basketball courts for us.
They actually-
Looking at potential co-stars for the pond liners if that pans out, but there are sources of contracting methods through co-stars and KPN.
I understand the solicitor's feverishly writing, so that could be a good sign that we might have something here. Do you have something you think might work?
Just gathering from what you said, I don't know if there are two specific sort of exclusions or exceptions, would be contract sourced through CoStar, Keystone Purchasing, or other co-ops as a preferred method, can go outside the RCO. And do we want to add in about the timing issue if in fact it is a,
The timing, we just handle
do it.
with
just as a waiver?
exception.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I
Is
think-
there a better generic term rather than naming CoStars and Keystone specifically in case they change?
I would add,
Co-op purchasing? Is that what you
have
said?
that, yeah, or,
Okay.
or general co-op purchase.
Okay.
or General
Just wanna make
co-ops,
sure.
yeah.
Now,
Do we need to make an
is that
amendment?
comfortable with,
Oh, thank you.
now, I'm forgetting who was the original maker of the motion, so is that agreeable, the second? Agreeable? Agreeable to Supervisor McCartney?
I didn't second it.
I know, but.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay,
Yeah.
Of course, yes.
And you're good?
I think so, yeah.
okay.
It's reasonable.
With that, I'll call the question, unless I'm not seeing anybody in the public or on the phone. All those in favor of advertising the ordinance amending the township's responsible contract ordinance signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Let the record reflect that the motion passed 5-0.
Thank you. Agenda item B is consider authorizing advertisement of an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance to provide for requirements relating to the demolition of historic resources. As you may recall, this has been discussed before with this board before. I do note that the ordinance that's in your package, I believe, hopefully is the most updated version. There was a requested change by your planning commission last week, specifically that as a condition, the board consider amending the ordinance granting, to tie the granting of a certificate of occupancy to the successful completion of any relocation or demolition of a historically significant property that is under the effects of the ordinance. We specifically added that in Article 1D, so that it now reads, in the event that any development or project is approved by the township which may contain a historic structure, which is a defined term, a certificate of occupancy for such development or project shall not be issued by the township until the successful completion of any demolition, removal, or relocation of such historic structure that is governed by this section. So that was the only change.
Were we waiting for comments from Bucks also? I thought
We were waiting for this to be authorized to be advertised, then we'll send it to Bucks County, and which we can do tomorrow, send it up, put it in the portal for Bucks County Planning Commission. Yes, they may have comments. They have a 30-day period in which to review.
forgive me for not knowing the process, but I thought we typically sent it to them, right? Because if they do have comments, that would be a second advertisement. So I don't know if we want to send it to them in advance. I'm good with whatever the board thinks is appropriate.
I personally, you mind if we have a discussion a little bit without, because I'm not ready to make a motion at all.
Sure, I guess I would say on that is, this isn't that far from other stuff that they've seen, so I don't think there's likely to be anything significant, but.
I just thought, again, maybe we need a motion, but I thought that was the process. But again, whatever the board says, I'm good with.
But I think it's missing some significant items in here relative to process that the Plan Commission may or may not, depending on their knowledge of the historic preservation. Some Plan Commission know more than others relative to the county, where they may add. They may have some significant comments on this. When I read it, it doesn't address the comments that I've had on it previously, relative to what constitutes a historic structure, who gets to make the call on that, and how it's implemented. As an example, 'cause that's kind of vague, right? As an example, this talks about the historic structures. and it starts at 1939, then any building over 100 years old. I mean, eventually, it's going to be all of our houses at some point. You know, not today, it's not all of our houses, but someday it will be. 1939, I understand where that comes from. Personally, when my professional experience going through this process has been the folks that do these analyses and make these determinations are usually, you know, master's, PhD level folks in historic preservation, cultural resources, et cetera, that go through a very detailed evaluation per the National Historic Preservation Act requirements. They're recognized professionals. They make recommendations as to whether or not a building or structure is eligible for listing on the National Register, and then that is vetted and through a state process through the State Historic Preservation Office, which is the PHMC, the Pennsylvania Historical Museum Commission. This doesn't mention any of that, so I think it kind of puts the onus on our volunteers, who may or may not be professionals in the field, to make those calls and to come up with those lists and to say what is historically significant or not. And that has a real impact on our residents. Now, I like the general philosophy of this, and what we're trying to accomplish, I think, is great. And the idea of tying it to a CEO, I like that even more. I think that was a great addition. I just think, personally, when I think about putting restrictions on what homeowners can do with their homes, that should be related back to a professional's opinion. And the way to do that, I think, is to, rather than say the 1939 or 100 years or any other year, say if a home is, or a structure is listed on the National Register, because that means it's absolutely gone through a process. It's gone through more than the process, because it's actually listed on the Historic Register, or has been determined eligible for listing on the National Register by PHMC, which is a specific regulatory process that would have to go through. Then I think those homes would be ripe for this type of review. Short of that, I think we're opening ourselves up potentially to lawsuits for folks that want to do something with their home because it is maybe originally not built to code, not built to modern standards, et cetera, whatever it may be, or there's just their personal preference, where that starts to get sticky. And there's going to be a lot of houses in the middle, right? I think we have 200 or 300 houses in the township that might meet some of the basic requirements relative to age. So when we set up a committee that all those homes will turn over at some point, and people may want to do something at some point. So you're almost setting up another mini zoning hearing board almost to review all these things. Not that it'll be that consistent, or not consistent, but that regular review where they have to meet. But I just think it gets sticky when something is not on a list that has been vetted by some regulatory body that is seen as being experts in the field. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you there was a lot of discussion about the year and 100 and what it would mean. And I know that well, I shouldn't say I know because you don't really ever know, but I believe that was not the committee's intent. But I hear your concern, and maybe that pushes us to asking the county for their feedback before we advertise. Maybe that's the way to go.
I think that's part of it. And then I personally would, in order to vote for this, I would have to see the inclusion of properties that have been deemed eligible for listing in the National Register at minimum to be the starting point for this, rather than just our volunteers saying this is historic.
But there are properties that would be deemed eligible for the Historic Register that aren't that maybe past the 1939 that Historical Commission might not view as.
Well, if they're deemed eligible by the state professionals, by the National Historic Preservation Act as National Register eligible if they're less than 100 years old or less than 1939, then those are, my opinion, they're still worth still worth adding to the list. There won't be many of those. There probably aren't any, to be honest, but there won't.
And just to be clear, it doesn't say that people can't take action on those homes. It just means that there'd be a chance to catalog and take pictures and stuff like that. So it's not this would not create a situation where if you were in one of those homes, you'd suddenly be barred from
Well,
things.
they would have to-
appreciate the property rights.
They would have to go through a conditional use approval to make certain changes.
That's correct, that's how it's
Right.
written.
Yeah.
And that would have
They
to go
would
through before.
lose-
There's potential, I mean, you have to spend money on all that process. If you're trying, if it's tied to a sale, you might lose the sale. You know, there's several issues with that, right? I like what we're trying to do, but I think the devil's in the details and the implementation to make sure that we're not, the good intentions, certain paths, all that good stuff, but.
Well, my understanding is, I wish someone from the Historic Commission was here, that it was not supposed to rise to the level of being put on the National Register or anything of that nature. This was really more like a something that the township was going to do, that it was not going to rise to that level to have to go through all those certifications, et cetera.
No, it's in the certification. Being listed on National Register is one thing. That's a whole process. Being eligible for listing is just the review that they're talking about. But it's been done by professionals, not volunteers. That this is what they do every day, and there's a specific methodology to do that. And when you read the National Historic Preservation Act, they have distinct definitions about who is capable and able to perform those evaluations that can then go to the SHPO. Doesn't have to be listed on anything, just has to be eligible for listing based off of the evaluations. There's two different things there.
Given where I sense the board may be at this time, do we have a motion on this, on the floor?
No, we don't.
How about we entertain a motion to authorize the solicitor to send
Planning Commission,
to the planning commission?
that's fair.
Does anyone have any concerns with that?
I'd make that motion.
Is there a motion?
So moved?
Is there a
Second.
second? Any questions on the motion? Hearing now, not seeing any public comment, no one on the phone?
No public comment.
Okay, call the question. All those in favor of authorizing the solicitor to provide the draft amendments to the zoning ordinance to provide requirements for the demolition of historic structures, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Let the record reflect the motion passed 5-0. General updates?
General updates are very general. That we're drafting, we're in the process of drafting easements, a couple of ordinances, as you know, that I've mentioned in the past, anticipating a couple of land development agreements that will be coming before us, revising contracts for the township, working with Monica and her group and a number of others. So we're preparing for an active 2025. That's it. Thank you very much.
Moving on to supervisor reports. I don't have any at this time. I think the planning commission was in between the meetings. So that was the one that we were both at. So yeah,
Correct.
we've already discussed that. Supervisor Grenier?
Sure. Actually, it's not on my list, but I did attend what I'll call the Stormwater Ordinance Subcommittee meeting or committee meeting last week. The group met and we had a pretty thorough review of the ordinance. I think there were several comments that will be addressed in an updated version probably by next month. General schedule will probably see something before the board in February timeframe, maybe a little sooner, but that seems what we're doing. High level, I think we've all had input to it, so there shouldn't be any surprises there, but it seems to be moving along nicely. That's all.
Supervisor Ross?
No report?
Supervisor Blondie?
The only thing I want to say is if you were planning on attending golf or Trenton Mercer this month, they have both been canceled because of conflicts with the holiday season, so see you in January.
Supervisor McCartney?
Nothing to report.
Moving on to other business. Is there any other business from any member? Not seeing any. Move on to agenda item 13, appointments and reappointments of boards and commissions.
Sure. Make a motion to appoint Virginia Torbert to the Planning Commission?
Second?
Okay, any questions? For that, I'll call the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? Not hearing any. Is there any other appointments or reappointments for this evening, or no?
Is anyone interested in appointing a new member to Citizens Traffic?
Who's the liaison? That would be, I will defer.
Don't get a last name wrong.
I'd like to make a motion to appoint Dakota DiMatteo to the Citizens Traffic Commission.
Paid attention. I'll second that.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And let the record reflect the motion was approved unanimously. Moving on to agenda item 14. This is additional public comment on non-agenda items if needed. So if you're sitting there thinking, hey, I'd like to talk a policy question, now's your chance. Not seeing any movement? Anybody on the call? Any callers?
No one online.
Okay, with that, I'll move on to agenda item 15, adjournment. We got you out.